All right, we are getting close. Let's figure out how to make this key pair. I found the article that is helpful. So basically, it explains what I was saying before, that you can create a key pair resource, but then you are going to have a private key pair associated with it. All right, so we can use this TLS private key resource in order to create it. All right, so this is not through AWS. This could be a different provider, but that's okay. So let's go ahead and add it in this code block here and see what happens with our Terraform. All right, I'm going to add it right above our public instance because in my mind that makes sense as I'm reading my code, but it's pretty much just like for readability. So I'm going to call this private key. All right, and then that's fine. All right, this is going to create our private key. So let's go ahead and do Terraform apply. All right, so you can see that it says inconsistent dependency file. So the reason is that we need a new provider for this. We need the HashiCorp TLS provider in order to create this key pair for us. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Terraform and hit upgrade, and you can see that it's been upgraded. All right. So then now we should be able to click Terraform apply. All right, so it's going to create us a private key now, and we can go ahead and click yes. Perfect. All right, and you can see now in providers, we have AWS, and then we also have TLS, which is great. All right, so next, what are we going to do now that we have created this private key? Now we should be able to use Terraform's resource. All right, so we will go ahead and add that. Okay, and we are going to, sure, I can leave it as that. I'm just going to call it key, I think. All right, and so here it's saying the key name is they're storing it in a variable. We haven't gone over variables yet, but the idea is to make your Terraform more modular. You can add a variable, so that way you name the variable, and then you can use the same plans, but add different names in, different AMIs, different things. We'll get into that eventually, but for now, we are just going to call it Coding with Callie key, and then we are going to, for the public key, we are going to, what are we going to write? It looks like it's trying here, so I'm going to say yes. We'll give it a try, and let's go ahead and do Terraform apply. All right, so you can see that it creating a public key for us and a private key for us. And let's go ahead and say yes. Perfect. Okay. Next, what we're going to do is we also need to scroll down. We need to store the key pair, right? Because when we SSH, we want to eventually SSH into this instance. Okay, so in order to SSH into the instance, we need to be able to have the file there. Okay, so that's going to be the next thing, right? So the private key needs to be stored in the instance in order to SSH into it. So we have to create a file for it. So let's go ahead and do this. Local file, and then we are going to call this coding with, let's call this private key. All right. The content is going to be our TLS private key, like that. Right. So the difference is their private key was just named RSA up here. Maybe. Oh, I think they have a typo in their thing. So they named it here, but then they're using this here. I think they just changed the name. But anyway, so the name of our private key, we made it was private key, and then we're going to get the PEM after it. For file name, we don't have any variables, so we're going to call it Coding with Callie key PEM. All right, so now let's go ahead and Terraform apply. Once again, we have a problem, and that's because we need a new provider. So let's go ahead and take a look, and you can see that now we have local as one of our providers too. All right, now we can go ahead and do Terraform apply. And it's going to create that local file. So let's go ahead and create it. And now you can see that we have our coding with Kali key in our files here. All right. Very cool stuff. All right. But if you notice, it's still, when we refresh our page, the instance doesn't have the key. And why is that? Well, it doesn't have the key because we didn't add the key into our plans when we did it. But now we can. So let's go ahead and see if it's going to get it. And it is. So key name is going to be AWS key pair, right? That's this resource here. Dot key, because that's what we named that key pair. And then dot key name, which is going to be coding with Kali key. Okay. So let's go ahead and Terraform apply. All right. And interesting. Oh, we didn't save. Haha. All right. So basically, I didn't save, so it didn't notice that I changed any of my infrastructure. But now it should see that my instance is different. So it's going to destroy the instance that we had, and then it's going to create a new instance because I am adding a key pair, and you can't do that in place. So it's going to destroy, and then it's going to so this instance is never going to work. You can see in our instance is that we have this one is shutting down. This was the one from the last video that we didn't have the public IP address with. So you can see it's still destroying. We're going to have to wait until it terminates before it can then create the next one. So we'll just hang out and hopefully this works. But yeah, I will link this here. But yeah, do notice that the RSA name is different than this example up here. So you'll have to create your own names and play around with it to make sure that it's working. Okay. I also found some like other typos too, but that's okay. So like this, right? It says TIS instead of TLS, which isn't the end of the world, but I'm too impatient. All right, so it terminated it, and then now it's creating the next one. Still creating. Should be done though soon because it says it's running. Okay, perfect. So now let's go ahead and refresh and let's take a look. So we have the public IP address, and if we go to connect, we can now connect. Okay. So let's try to connect to our instance here. So the first thing I'm going to do is run the chmod. So I can change the ownership on the PEM key because this is my first time using the PEM key. And then I can SSH into it, hopefully. And another gotcha. I can't SSH into it. Let's go investigate why. All right, so first off, let's make sure that it's passing the checks. All right, so it's still saying it's initializing, so that could be it. But what I think is happening is we did forget one thing, and that is we forgot that we didn't make any security rules. Although it looks like for inbound, we're allowing everything from everything and everything for outbound, which is not great and not what we want to have. All right. It still says initializing. All right, I'm going to pause here so that way I can wait for this to finish and I will resume once it's ready. All right, so it took a while to load, but this is what I mean. The status check, 2 out of 2 checks passed. Okay, so now that we have that, let's take a look if that was our issue. And I just clicked enter to SSH into my instance, and that wasn't the issue. All right, so I'm going to Control C to stop running that because eventually it would turn time out, although I guess I'll just let it time out and pull down. Now, what is the reason for that? The reason is that when we set up our security, we didn't actually do any security. All right. So it's allowing all ports from this security group to go in and all outbound, right? But it's not letting us do any SSHing access. Okay. So we need to set up the security group ourselves with Terraform because like I said earlier, anything that you manually did in the console, you have to do with Terraform. So let's go ahead and make a security group. All right, so let's go ahead and do AWS, maybe, I don't know what it would be called, instance security group. All right, so here's the security group Terraform. All right. Allow inbound traffic. All right, so it looks like they set up the security group here. They're naming it and describing it and associating it with a VPC. And then what they're doing is they're using ingress rules and egress rules for what their traffic is going to be. All right, so let's go ahead and set it up similarly. All right, so I'm going to copy this. And we are going to think through what we want. All right, so we want security group, coding with Callie, public security group. All right, we want to say allow traffic, allow SSH inbound traffic. And we also want to do and allow SSH and TCP inbound traffic, and all outbound traffic. All right, so we'll use the main and we'll name this coding with Callie public security group. Okay, so the SSH is we want to be able to SSH into our instance, which you can see timed out. And then we want TCP inbound traffic. So NGINX runs on port 80. So we want to be able to, on port 80, ping our NGINX server. Then we also want all outbound traffic. So when we're in the instance, we want to be able to contact the internet however we want. Okay, so now next we want to set up a resource. And then we want to say AWS security group rule. Nope, security group ingress rule. And then we are going to say coding with Callie public security group ingress. And let's start with SSH. All right. So the security group ID is, yes, AWS security group, right? Dot coding with Callie public security group dot ID type ingress. That makes sense. I'm curious, it was bringing up, it feels like we don't need type ingress because it's an ingress rule. What's happening here? All right, so I'm going to get rid of type ingress because I'm curious. It does not like this. AWS security group, coding with Callie, public. Interesting. All right, I think I'm going to do it this way instead. So basically in the public, in the resource, we can just define ingress and egress like this too. So I'm going to do that. Let's do ingress. All right. Egress. I'm going to just let it do its thing. Okay, so this is the typical egress. You can see it here. We don't have IPv6 CIDR blocks, so we don't have to worry about that. Basically, we're saying that we want to allow all traffic for all protocols from our EC2 instance out, okay? For ingress, we are going to have two rules. So the first one that we're going to have is from port 22 to port 22. So that's going to be our SSH port. So protocol TCP, all right? And then CIDR blocks all. We want it to be our own public IP address, but that is going to be something that I think we'll do in an iterative manner. So we'll look up figure out how to get our public IP address in here later. So I'm going to add a comment so that way I remember to do it. So figure out how to get personal IP address instead of all. Okay. So we'll do that, and then we need that will allow us to SSH. Then we need another ingress where, yep, for port 80, where we can do TCP, and we want it to be able to come in from all traffic there, so that makes sense. And then we're going to name this security group. All right, so now we need to add that security group to our instance. So I'm going to let GitHub Copilot flesh it out for me. But yep, so we're going to say our security group IDs that we want to use, because you could use multiple security groups, but we're going to use our AWS security group coding with Kali public sg.id. All right, so now after all of that, let's run Terraform apply and see what happens. All right, and let's say yes. All right, so I went ahead and added my security group. All right, let's go ahead and see if it successfully, oh, I didn't save. Yeah, I was gonna say it didn't seem like it added it to the actual EC2 instance. So let's do that again, Terraform apply, because I'm thinking it's gonna have to delete the instance. But let's see. All right, to change. Oh, okay, it looks like you can update security groups in place, so we won't have to actually delete the instance, which is nice. All right, so it's modifying our security group now. So let's open this up and let's take a look. So we're going to refresh and nope. Interesting. Go to security. Oh, and now you can see now we have inbound traffic from 22, which will allow us to SSH. And then we have traffic for port 80, which will allow us to view our NGINX image once we do it, which we will worry about the NGINX image later. But for now, let's go ahead and let's try to SSH into our instance. And woohoo, we did it. All right. I'll see you in the next video where we try to, through Terraform, download NGINX and get it started. All right. See you in the next one.